Adnams Old Ale.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Banned Bikes and Booze Reviews. Today, one from a great brewery. They are absolutely fantastic. I love what Adnams do. They're based in, is it Suffolk? Yes, it is Suffolk. And they are based in an area where I think, from doing my research and from doing the tasting of the beer, the best malt in this country comes from, and that is East Anglia, around that way, the east coast of the United Kingdom. Now, Adnams are a relatively old brewery. They've been going, well, there's a bit of a, how can I say, I wouldn't say, it's not contentious, but Adnams, in the true sense, have been going since 1890, and they have been brewing consistently good beer since then. Now, if you look on my channel, you'd see that there's quite a lot of Adnams beers that I've reviewed. I thought I'd done all of them, but I hadn't. Some of them are relatively easy to get hold of, i.e. Broadside, which is an absolutely fantastic beer. I think it's their flagship beer, and it is superb. But I wouldn't have expected anything else from Adnams. They are, as I say, a great brewery. They also do one of my favourite barley wines, and that is the Tally Ho barley wine. Now, I've reviewed it once on the channel. I should revisit that because the first time I tried it, I absolutely loved it. It was a 10 out of 10 beer, and it has remained my favourite. I've tried a lot of barley wines since then, and there have been some fantastic examples. But for me, the one that stands out is always Tally Ho, because that just, I don't know, it just went that little bit further. Now, if you're not sure what a barley wine is, all this, what I'm talking about, Old Ale, as this is called, and barley wine, they all tie into each other, and the two names are synonymous. So what is Old Ale? Old Ale is, as the name would suggest, very old. It is the ale that was around in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it would be a mixture of beer. Now, when I say a mixture, I should really say a blend of beer, because there would be beer that would come from the brewery, and it would be fresh. All the beer would be matured or fermented in the inn or the pub, and there would be varying degrees of the stage of fermentation, so that the fresh stuff would be akin to what mild beer is. I mean, that's a very, very rough comparison. I would say that, and this is purely from my research, I obviously have no experience, because I know I'm an old fucker, but I'm not that old. But the young or fresh beer that they had would be mixed with what they would call the keeping ale or the stock ale. That would be beer that has been sat for a while. It would go through what they would call a secondary fermentation, and it would be relatively sour, because there would be that Brettanomyces or wild yeast. Now, what is wild yeast? Well, it's basically the yeast that's in the air. If you did or didn't know, you would be breathing in living organisms into your body every day. In the air, there is yeast. And if you've ever had a Flanders Red Ale, if you've ever had a Belgian Lambic, that's what they're based on. Whenever you get that sour flavour in beer, it's to do with Brettanomyces yeast. So sour beer can be an off flavour in certain English styles, and it could denote that it's basically hit the oxygen, or oxygen has hit it, because oxygen is the enemy of beer. Most beers anyway. As I say, the Lambic beers they're fermented in open vats, and the Brettanomyces yeast, which is in the atmosphere, that will react with the fermentable sugars that are in, they call it a cool ship, and it's like basically a big open vat, and they will react with that, and they have their own unique flavour and supposedly the ones around Brussels is where lambic comes from, is quite unique. But getting back to the old ale and the English style of old ale, the Brettanomyces yeast would be either in the atmosphere or it would be in the wood that would hold this beer. So what would happen is you would get punters coming in and they would either have just the fresh beer, or they would have a mix of or a blend, I should say. I shouldn't really call it a mix, it's a blend of the old ale, or the stock ale, I should say, and the fresh stuff as well. And you could, regarding flavour, you could make up your own styles, not styles of beer, but flavours of beer, depending on how much of the fresh stuff and how much of the mature stuff you mixed with each other. And that evolved into IPAs as well. So when you think of the modern day term of IPAs, you know, the whole myth about it going to India and being drunk by the soldiers and all that, it actually wasn't. The soldiers would drink porter because it was cheaper. The IPAs that went over there were more for the upper classes and the middle classes who could afford it, who were based in India. But the IPAs that were going over there, or the pale ales that they were talking about, they reckon, and I don't know how true this is, but they reckon if you've ever heard of the Orval beer, the Belgian beer, they were very like that. And Orval does remind me of what I would class as an old ale, and that would be dark, very malt forward, and high in alcohol content. Now that contrasts with this stuff, which is a low ABV. So this is where the similarities, or this is where the connection comes in between barley wine being a high ABV beer, because it would have fermented longer, and of course if you ferment it longer you're going to get a higher ABV. And this stuff, which as I say is a 4.1% beer and is a dark beer, and it is akin to an old style of mild beer. Now this particular recipe that Adnams have got, it dates back to, I think it's 1890, and the Tally Ho beer that I really do like, that recipe goes back to 1880, and this is the good thing about Adnams, they do have access to a lot of their old recipes, and that's quite a good thing, because I know Fuller's do. Fuller's have recently done a range of beers, and it's old style beers made from old recipes, obviously with modern ingredients. Done it on a limited edition. I didn't manage to get hold of it, and I went onto the website and it had all sold out really, really quickly. I can only imagine how good that tastes, but sadly I didn't get hold of any. They should do more of that, because that's what, I don't know, I think that's what we should be doing. We should be redeveloping these old recipes with new ingredients and seeing what we can come up with, or seeing what the brewers, seeing what they can come up with. I'm sure it would be good, but you know, brewers are on a budget. What is profitable and what isn't is, you know, especially with a brewer like Fuller's, it's all down to Asahi. They would give it the yay or nay, I would imagine, and maybe they thought it wasn't that profitable to brew on a much bigger scale, but it was a limited edition, and I didn't get hold of any, and I nearly cried my effing eyes out. I've just got over a cold, so that probably is what done for me getting some of that stuff, because I didn't want to look at beer. That's how bad the cold was, and yeah, I'm over it now, thankfully, but it knocked me for six. I didn't have a beer for a week, and yeah, not good. Glad to say I'm more or less recovered now, so yeah, everything is good in the hood, as they say. Anyway, let's get back to this stuff. This is an interesting beer. It's got an interesting brew sheet, and that's another thing I like about Adnams, because they do give you a brew sheet and they tell you exactly what hops and ingredients have gone into the beer. So without further ado, let's get on to the next section and see what's in this beer. Right, before we do, 500ml bottle, 4.1% old ale on the back, based on an old recipe dating back to 1890, a mild ale style beer, dark red brown in colour with an aroma of caramel and nutty chocolate. Well, who'd have thunk that? Anyway, what else have we got? Not a lot. Usual spiel on the back. There is the label, very simple, and I do like that. That is a fella in a sou'wester. I'm assuming he's some kind of sailor. And yeah, he's got a pipe in his mouth. What a fucking rebel. The brew sheet, interesting. So let's get on to the malt. Now, as I said in the previous section, this brewery used East Anglian malt, which is the best malt you can get in this country. And it's grown in a maritime climate, or a maritime environment, right on the coast. So that does give it an extra, I wouldn't say an extra edge, but a different type of flavour to beer that is grown, malt that is grown inland. Whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, I don't know, but it is unique, and there aren't many, even in America as well, there aren't many breweries that can boast that they use malt that's come from a maritime climate. I know that the Flensburger brewery do, because they are unique in Germany. Germany has quite a relatively small coastline, and they use malt that has been grown in a maritime climate, because they are way up north on the Jutland Peninsula in Schleswig-Holstein, on the border with Denmark. But almost every brewer in the United Kingdom, unless they're getting their malt from elsewhere, the beer in the UK is brewed with malt that comes from a maritime climate. And for top fermented beers, I think that is fantastic. For bottom fermented beers, I don't know, because the water lets it down. But that's another story. The type of malt that is used in this, they used East Anglian pale malt, which is the base malt for this. Pale malt is always I wouldn't say it's the cheapest malt, but it's the malt that makes up the most of the grain bill in any beer is a light coloured malt, because it's cheap and it's grown in abundance, and it takes it doesn't really take much processing apart from the usual maltings, what the maltings do. But you don't have to roast it, you don't have to, with crystal malt, you don't have to try and cultivate the sugar, etc., etc. So there you go, it's got that in it. It's also got crystal malt in there as well, so that would be a roasted malt that has sugar on the buds, to feed the buds, I should say, and it's kilned when the buds start blooming, and it basically kills these little shoots that come out, but it leaves the sugar on there, so that gives it a nice sweetness. And as it's kilned, as the name would suggest, the sugar crystallises to give it a little bit more of an intense sweet flavour. Nice. I do like a beer with crystal malt in there. And there's only a single hop in here, and the single hop is a first gold hop, which is basically a golden hop, and that has some quite good characteristics. But you have to remember on this beer, this is an old ale. Old ales are all about the malt. It's not about the hops that are in here. The hops are only used for some slight flavouring and some slight bittering, but it really is all about the malt, and you have to bear that in mind. So when I give you the profile of what the first gold hop is, you should take that with a pinch of salt, because you're really not going to get much of that in here with the malt, because that's the dominant flavour in here. But first gold hops, they do have quite an orangey, zesty type note to them. They're quite spicy as well, and they're quite floral too, and they have supposedly magnolia flavours in them. I don't know, I've never eaten a magnolia. We've got a magnolia tree out in the fucking garden, and I'll tell you something, if I had my way, I know it's not very green, but I would cut the fucker down, because the fucking leaves, when they fall, they don't die, and they just go everywhere. It really is. It's like a bed of just pink bloody leaves that won't fuck off. And the other tree we've got a cherry tree, and that's honestly, it's the leaves. I've filled up 2 bins already, and the garden is still full of leaves. It's autumn now. It's quite cold actually. It's the 28th or 29th of December. November. Get it right. It's the 28th of November, and it is effing well taters out there, I should say. And this is a supposed winter warmer. That's another term that old ale is associated with. Winter warmer, barley wine, stock ale, keeping ale, October ale, etc., etc. Anyway, I am digressing and waffling. Let's get it open and let's see if this is any good. Right, I had a beer yesterday from the Ridgeway Brewery, and it was bottle conditioned and it fizzed up everywhere. So I'm going to make a little bit of space on this desk, because I don't want to get my work computer covered in beer, because that will not be very fucking good. Right, I'm hoping this doesn't fizz up. No, it doesn't. I think it must have had some lively yeast in that bottle yesterday. Bottle conditioned pale ale wasn't that great either. So yeah, that didn't get a good mark. There's the cap, as if you didn't know what an Adnams cap looked like. Let's get it into ye olde glass, and that is very, very dark indeed, almost like a porter. But that is what mild looks like. Now, if you're looking at this on the camera, you're going to see that's just like a dark ale. But with me holding it up to the light, I've got some lights here. That looks like a very, very, very dark ruby. But that's what you get on the nose. Yeah, and from what was on the bottle, that's definitely the aroma profile. It's quite chocolatey, nutty, and caramel as well, as they say. Yes, that is the perfect description that they've given on that bottle. It smells really, really malty and nice too. Now, I am partial to a mild, and mild is quite I wouldn't say it's gone out of favour, but it's not as popular as it used to be. It used to be the most popular style of beer in the UK during the 50s and 60s, but I've said this on a few videos, unscrupulous landlords used to throw all the slops into mild, and it was basically undrinkable, and that's why it fell out of favour, and that is a real shame. Mild, as the name would suggest, is a sessionable, dark beer, quite malt forward, and very nice indeed, if it's done properly. I've tried the Elgood's Black Dog. That is fantastic. If you want a really good mild, an English mild to taste, I would recommend that. That is fantastic. But Hook Norton do a mild as well. That's quite nice too. So let's see what Adnams have got going on this one. Bottoms up. That's nice. That is really nice. Oh, and the finish. Oh, there's a lovely finish on that. Yeah, this really is. I mean, they've called it an old ale, but I think this should have been called a mild. I think if the ABV was higher, then yeah, I would have said that's bang on for an old ale. But this is an absolutely outstanding mild, I have to say. Oh, that's really good. There's some really nice roasted malts on that. Quite nutty, chocolatey, and caramel. They're the three big flavours. The hop profile on this, I'm not really getting much, to be honest. But there is an element of fruit on there as well, I have to say. And I'm just trying to work out what it is. It's almost like vanilla. Vanilla or cherry, or vanilla and cherry I should say, but it's nice, whatever it is very nice indeed. Some nice head retention on that as well. I've just given that a pour, and some very, very nice uniform style bubbles there. Oh, the aromas are just great though, and it's like almost like a vanilla, fruity vanilla, caramel, chocolate, nuts, and that really is what it is like, and it's relatively sweet as well. That crystal malt is giving it some real sweetness to it, and it's really nice. This is a fantastic mild. Oh, it's lovely. I can't get enough of that, and the more I drink, the more I like it. But I wouldn't have expected anything else from Adnams. That really is good. Now, I don't know whether, well, they obviously know their beer, but old ale is a style of beer. Now, whether they called it old ale and it is a mild, they've said it's a mild style beer. Yeah, a mild ale style beer. For me, it's a mild, and it is one of the best milds I have ever tasted. This really is good. Now, again, an idea for another head-to-head. Two of the best milds. Well, the Elgood's Black Dog is probably the one that stands out for me as being the best, but this is definitely a contender. And I really do think there should be a head-to-head with this. And I'm going to make notes, because I had yesterday an ESB from Ridgeway, which was fantastic. So I'm going to write these down before I forget, because Captain Alzheimer's will forget. And I'm going to have these head-to-heads, and I'm going to tell you exactly which one I think is good. Give me 2 minutes while I write that down. Duly noted. Watch this space, because that is going to happen. I do like doing the head-to-head videos, because I I'd like to give you my opinion on the best of the best. And I know the little Welsh fellas started doing head-to-head beers now as well. They are popular beers. But I will only do a head-to-head with 10 out of 10 beers. I won't compare shit to shit. There's no point. I want you to get the best beer, well, what I think is the best beer, and have the best drinking experience for the least amount of money. So you don't have to fork out to try and find two fantastic beers. So yeah, watch this space. There's going to be a spate of these. I'll put my next order in, and I'll buy all these beers, and we do the head-to-head, and hopefully you might get some a new beer to add to your list of favourites. But I know that this is going to be added to my list of favourites because this is an outstanding mild. It really is good. Oh, it's lovely. It really does encapsulate what a mild should be. Mild doesn't have massive flavours. That's what people should get into their heads. It's not a flavour fest, if you know what I mean. Mild does have flavour, don't get me wrong, but it's very rounded, it's quite subdued, and it's balanced. Well, it's not balanced, it's more malt forward. But the thing about mild, it needs to be low ABV and it needs to be drinkable. And that, for me, is the perfect session beer. Now, you could argue that Guinness is, what, 4.2, 4.3? That's a stout, but it's got, I know the two styles of beer are not that much different, to be honest, but they are different. One's got nitro, obviously, and one's called a stout because it's got more roasted malt. But mild is akin to that type of characteristic. It's got the low ABV, it's got the roasted malt. The flavours are subdued, and believe me, I know you might not think it, but the Guinness flavours are quite subdued. If you compare it to some real fucking monster stouts, like I can't remember that there was a Belgian stout I tried, which was absolutely fantastic. That had real robust flavours, and the Shepherd Neame double stout as well. If you want an intense flavour for your stout, try that Shepherd Neame double stout. 1 pint or 1 bottle of that, and yeah, you'll be sat back thinking, fucking hell, that was an experience. But mild is the exact opposite. It's sessionable. It's got rounded, subtle flavours, and it's drinkable. And this has got all of them qualities in abundance. And it's absolutely fantastic, and I am fucking well loving it. It's lovely. Nice sweet flavour. Little hints of roasted malt, but there's a lot of caramel on there. There's a nuttiness to it. Relatively sweet. What I'm getting is a vanilla style flavour, subtle, but it's there. Probably that's what is coming from the First Gold hops. I don't know, but there is definitely some kind of vanilla-esque. Maybe it's a mixture of the sweetness and the floral notes from the First Gold hops, but the hops do take a back seat on this. There's no real bitterness on this that I can discern, and it really is an absolutely fantastic beer. So what is the verdict on Adnams Old Ale? Well, I bought this thinking I was going to get the real old ale style beers. I didn't look at the ABV, and the more I researched it, and they even say it themselves, so it's not me being fucking Sherlock Holmes. They say it on the back. It's a mild style beer. Now, I know that mild isn't a very fashionable style of beer at the moment, but it is a very, very underrated style of beer. And Adnams, in my opinion, have come up with one of the best. And there's definitely going to be a head-to-head with this, because the Elgood's Black Dog for me was an absolutely outstanding mild, one of the best, or the best that I'd tried so far. This is definitely giving it a run for its money. I'm not going to compare the two from memory. This needs to be done in a head-to-head, which it will happen. Trust me, it will. And I just think that this is a 10 out of 10 beer. It's one of the best miles I've tried in a hell of a long time. And I've tried a few of the milds that the Wetherspoons have had on their guest ales, sort of flurries that they have. They normally last about a week, and there's been some okay-ish ones. I know it's different when it's in a bottle and when you've got it on cask, but they've been okay, and just okay, nothing special. But this really is good. And if you're a fan of mild, and I know there are a few fans of mild on the channel, some subscribers. Dave, I'm looking at you, mate. I know you like a mild. If you've not tried this, you really need to try this, mate, because this is fantastic. For me, that is 10 out of 10 all day long. An outstanding mild. Recommended. Get it. It's on Beers of Europe at the moment, and fill your boots. Have a look at the Adnams site though, because if you buy direct from them, you can also buy some German beer. They do Bitburger, and Bitburger's a great beer. So if you want to mix up your beers, get onto the Adnams website. They've started doing the Bitburger stuff, and they also do the Benedictiner lager, or the Helles, and the wheat beer. Not so great beers, to be honest, but they're just okay. But they're on there, and they're nice. They're certainly better than any lager that you'll ever fucking pick up from a supermarket or your local Skunk Central. But there you go. For me, 10 out of 10, fantastic. And watch this space for the head-to-head with the Elgood's Black Dog. And remember, beer is working class champagne.